But I think everybody wants to get to this piece that dropped.
Absolutely. And while Manny Machado was the guy in the targets last week in the Union Tribune, this morning in a piece that dropped around 2 a.m. So if you haven't seen it yet, that's probably why. It's definitely A.J. Preller's turn in the crosshairs to analyze what went wrong this season and what measure of responsibility a general manager who has been around for almost a decade now is responsible for the culture and the failings of this San Diego Padres team, the institutional failure, as it's referred to multiple times during this piece by Dennis Lin and Ken Rosenthal. But it's also not just as simple as saying, well, A.J. Preller is just a disastrously bad general manager who doesn't know what he's doing and he needs to go. The piece also includes some balance of people who praise AJ for his work ethic, his tireless dedication to trying to make the Padres a better team, but it also is counterpointed with, former staffers and current players who are quoted anonymously who say there's too much meddling, it creates for a toxic environment, it's hard to have success when, AJ is constantly sticking his finger into, the day-to-day operations of a baseball team.
Not only that is it hard to have success when someone's meddling. This is what got me. It's hard to continue to root for the guys and root for the team for which you're a coach or even a player when you feel like the guys behind you, like the general manager and his staff, are constantly jumping on and off the boat for you, right? It's the paranoid culture, the looking over your shoulder type scene, and that to me was like, wow, okay. So, and we're talking even with coaches. The coach is like, am I really cemented here? And I understand that no coach is ever safe, no matter really who you are. There's a handful of outliers, Ben, guys that have earned their way, that they'll tell you when it's their time to go. Nick Saban, people like that. Like Nick Saban calls his own shots. He says, I'm done when I'm done. So I think there's some of that needs to be taken into account. But it's hard to get behind an organization when you don't know if you're going to be jettisoned out as soon as the season's over and blamed for a lot of stuff that maybe you really didn't have anything to do with. Maybe you were just following orders. So there's a lot of that stuff in here. And the bottom line is, doesn't seem like a real great place to work.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah, I mean, it did. Last year it was okay. When they're winning and everyone is feeling good, it seems like it's all right. The problem is, and as we've seen it over and over again.
Hold on one second, because there was another piece written about the same thing the year before. So last year seems to be a bit of an outlier.
Well, yeah, I mean, the thing is, and it's an emotional, moody organization. When things are going well and everyone's winning, there really aren't that many problems. But when things start to go poorly, that's when paranoia sets in and things go off the rails. No one's paranoid about a team that's winning. Right now, I'm sure things feel very good. 5 wins in a row, and, hey, we don't need to say anything.
I don't know. I think it's the nature, at least of fandom. I sent you guys a couple tweets last night from other fan bases that are winning. I watched a guy on Twitter absolutely melt down about the Houston Astros, and I watched a guy on Twitter melt down about the Texas Rangers. I sent it to you guys. The exact same stuff we see, different area codes, same old S, right? That being said, Ben, the winning is really the outlier in the losing. You know what I'm saying? Like there hasn't been as much winning as there has been losing here in AJ's tenure. So it really does a good job. If you haven't read the piece yet, I'm trying to think of the best place to start. Should we just kind of go in order of how it opens?
Sure.
Okay.
I mean, like in the first section, let's read a couple of the quotes. Dennis Lin talks to current and former players. They mostly are anonymous quotes. One former player says, "You can argue he's one of the best talent evaluators ever in the game, A.J. Preller, but just because you can evaluate talent doesn't mean you know how to handle people."
Sure.
Another current player says, "I really do think the same group would come back next year and be the complete opposite, win 100 games." There's a lot of back and forth here that A.J. Preller does some things well, other things, though, especially the kind of the handling of the people, the day-to-day running of the team.
I mean, in the first like
not
4
strong.
paragraphs, a player calls it an institutional failure.
Right.
A player.
Toxic. One former staffer said it's the most toxic. Again, we talked a little bit about this yesterday. By all accounts, and it's even mentioned in this piece, the guys like each other. That's the weird thing. Like, that's the thing that I'm really having a hard time wrapping my head around. The guys all seemingly get along. Now, does it mean they're all pulling on the same rope and any other tired-ass sports radio trope you want to use? Probably not. It seems like we have a lot of me guys. And when you have a lot of me guys, which, by the way, is okay, as long as you have some of the other guys to kind of balance it out, and seemingly we don't. But the guy that put that together was A.J. Preller. He brought in those guys, and, from there, that's when you need to foster a culture. He's tried a couple of different things we can talk about culture-wise. Those have blown up spectacularly. His relationship with Bob Melvin is mentioned. There's a really good section about him and Bob Melvin, which kind of confirms some of the things that I've heard all season, even going back into last year, Ben, when they were winning, in fact.
Yeah. The second section has to do with a guy that I think a lot of Padres fans not familiar with. I've never met him personally, but works for the organization by the name of Don Tricker, someone who's been with the Padres since late 2017, early 2018. So a long time, a guy who is very close with A.J. Preller and has an unorthodox background in the world of Major League Baseball. He's a former New Zealand All Blacks rugby coach, performance manager. And he was brought in, quote, according to a former Padres coach, to change the culture of the Padres, emulate some things that a very successful program on the other side of the world did, something, outside of the box that A.J. Preller thought, could be ahead of the curve. Other teams aren't doing this. Let's try doing something a little bit different with an outside eye from somewhere else that's had a lot of success, and give him some influence and some ability to go in and ask questions and maybe think of things that we haven't thought of before.
So interestingly enough, I read the book. It's called Legacy. 15 Lessons in Leadership by James Kerr, what the All Blacks can teach us about the business of life. I read that book years ago. I think right when we started is when I picked up that book and read it. And it's a good book. It's really interesting. I mean, this is one of the most successful cultural teams of all time. Some of the things that I read that I loved. I mean, there's a part in it about character. It says, even after a huge win, the All Blacks finish their celebrations and sweep the sheds because no one looks after the All Blacks. The All Blacks look after themselves. Don't be too big to do the small things. I loved that. I thought that was the coolest thing. Whenever you see somebody cleaning up their own mess, right? Instead of letting somebody do it for them. No, this is our team. This is our house. This is our dugout, whatever. I thought that was really cool. So based on, and I'll be honest, the guy's been here 6 years. I'd never heard his name until this season. Never. I never noticed him on the website. I'd never heard his name. Things start getting out. You start listening. You start hearing things. You start looking up things yourself. Now it comes out in this article that the way it was perceived by the players is, oh, cool, you guys sent a spy in here that really has no idea what he's talking about.
Let me read just a paragraph here from Dennis's piece about Don Tricker. It says, still almost 6 years after his hiring, many current and former Padres players, coaches, and other employees continue to express consternation about Tricker's responsibilities. Tricker, especially early on, frequented the clubhouse, sat in on player and staff meetings, quietly taking notes. Some believe he's effectively a spy for the front office. In parentheses, Padres do not allow front office employees to speak to the media without permission. Quote, I don't know what Don does, honestly, one former front office staffer said. Another quote, all he was doing was judging, according to an ex-coach. He never provided any feedback to any coach or player. Not everyone had a poor experience with Tricker, though. One former staffer said Tricker, as an outsider to the sport, regularly posed thought-provoking questions. Why, for example, did the Padres take batting practice that did not replicate the intensity of in-game pitching? So, again, there's balance here. It's not all negative and all positive, but it does seem that for whatever purpose that Don Tricker was brought in, that players and coaches never fully bought into this guy is here to help us, and let's use his his experience and his unorthodox, perspective as a way we can advance. They saw him potentially as like an enemy in their own midst or someone to be wary of inside the clubhouse.
The thing that blows my mind is he's been here 6 years. It clearly hasn't worked. This has been an issue. This was an issue a couple of years ago. Why do talented people get thrown out of this organization? So I'm not saying he's not talented. Maybe he's not a talented culture builder at baseball when he doesn't know anything about baseball. Why is Preston Mattingly gone and Don Tricker remains? Why is Skip Schumacher gone and Don Tricker remains? Why is, the list goes on and on. There's a whole, slew of...
Where's Preston Mattingly?
The Phillies.
He's like the guy.
He's the
now.
guy. He's going to be probably the successor to Dave Dombrowski when he's done. I mean, he is like... We had him. He would be on the bench
He looked
talking
like one
to
of
the
the
guys.
players' kids. Like he was just
dude.
like hanging out, picking up
But
baseballs.
there's a few guys. There's a few guys that are, I think, with the Braves now. But again, man, I'm all for trying stuff. Sometimes it doesn't work. 6 years is a long time. Culture problems were an issue, and they were highlighted 2 years ago in the piece by Dennis Lind and Ken Rosenthal. Here we are 2 years later. What has changed? If nothing changes, nothing changes.
And I want to get to your guys' thoughts on the relationship between A.J. Preller and Bob Melvin.
100%.
Because after reading that article, and I know we'll get to it next, after reading that article, I don't know how you can read that and go, oh, yeah, we can run it back with both of those guys
Right.
next year.
100%.
One of them will be gone.
That